And I am not a doctor. Having said that, I have picked up a few little bits of medical know-how along the way. For example, I do know where to look and what to look for if somebody has accidentally sprayed ant killer in their armpit. If you suspect someone has sprayed ant killer in their armpit, the place to look is their internet search history. For example, recently I was staying at a friend of mine's, Paul's, and in the morning I was using his laptop and I discovered that in his internet search history there was the phrase, accidentally sprayed armpits with ant killer. Dead giveaway. You can tell that is a sentence that has been typed in panic. As much as anything because it includes the word accidentally. As if somebody thinks there might be a different set of results for deliberately sprayed armpits with ant killer. It's probably only fair that I point out that the real reason that phrase could be found in Paul's internet search history is that I had stayed over at his house the night before, and that morning I'd done something very stupid and I was quite worried about my armpits. In my defence, we'd had a very big night out. To put that in context, I'd been so drunk I'd had my socks stolen while my shoes were still on. Anyway, I was Googling the effects of accidentally spraying armpits with ant killer because I wanted to know whether I needed medical attention. And when you're doing that sort of search, you might not know it, but you are establishing your mortalification index. On the horizontal axis here, you are measuring how likely something is to kill you, the threat to your mortality, while on the vertical axis, you're measuring how embarrassing the situation is or how likely you are to be mortified. It's only when you cross-reference those two things that you get your mortalification index. And that's how you know whether you need to go and see a doctor or not. I'll show you how it works. We start here. There is no predicament. All is well on both scores. But then, let's say you discover you've used the wrong glue on your vajazzle. Okay? Very unlikely to kill you, but really quite embarrassing. In which case, you probably don't submit yourself to the humiliation of speaking to a medical professional. I think for most people, a rule of thumb would be, is it more embarrassing than it is threatening? Obviously, if it's more threatening than embarrassing, you're in this red zone and you ought to go and see an actual doctor. And if it's more embarrassing than it is threatening, then you're in this green zone, in which case Dr. Google is sufficient. I think for most people that would be considered a sensible approach, although there is a particular bunch of people for whom finding themselves in the green zone means seeing an actual doctor and their camera crew, and that's why this exists. Scary people. Anyway, like I say, most people, I think, would deem this a sensible approach. Of course, the truth is, that's not at all sensible. If you think about it, if there is even the slightest risk of something killing you, go and see a doctor. How embarrassing something is should be of no relevance whatsoever. If you've just discovered, I don't know, that maybe your butt plug has been accidentally infused with uranium, put the embarrassment to one side and go and see a doctor. That appears a sensible approach, but it's not. Realistically, it should look more like that, shouldn't it, really? Although I think for a lot of people, myself included, certainly for a lot of men, it actually looks more like that. I'd rather die than expose myself to any sort of humiliation. When you Google something like that, you go on a weird journey, don't you? You're effectively walking into the world's largest hospital waiting room, and every letter you type, every little bit of information you give it puts you closer and closer to the specific department that you need. When you've only got as far as accidentally, your panic is still high. You're in a waiting room. You're in a waiting room surrounded by people who have no need of medical assistance. Accidentally vegan, you can sod off. Some of us are worried we might be dying here, mate. If veganism troubles you, go and have a sausage and get out of our way. Just hitting the space bar after the Y of accidentally changes everything. Suddenly, I'm surrounded by people who've accidentally consumed rubbing alcohol. And I imagine that's quite serious. And now I'm the one who's in the wrong department. These are people who've got very specific needs, surely. And you know what? Accidentally drank decaf can get out of the way. Every letter you type radically changes the landscape. You add an S, and there are people accidentally rejecting people they fancy on Tinder. It's only when then you add a P that you finally find you've moved to people who've accidentally sprayed things, and then, with the addition of an R, finally, we are all sprayers. And all of that has taken not much more than 3 seconds. You have to get as far as armpits before you start to get any real reassurance. Although even then, there are idiots clogging up the system. No sympathy. A lot of questions, but no sympathy. No sympathy. Anyway, the important thing is that Paul and I worked it all out and nobody died, unless there were any ants in my armpit. Essentially, the advice is, don't do it. If you do it, definitely wash it off, but mainly, do not spray insecticide on your armpits, OK? Very good advice. Now, Paul and I were having a cup of tea, and he suddenly goes, "Oh, man, you're going to put this in one of your shows, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, probably. But don't worry about it. If I do, I'll pretend it was me." Now, of course, none of this would have happened if he'd been content to deal with his ant problem the traditional way, using boiling water, although I'm now obliged to point out, do not pour boiling water on your armpits. Don't do that. You have to wonder, how stupid do you have to be to spray insecticide on your armpits? Right? The truth is, Paul is quite a smart cookie. No flies on him. And that is working hard to tell you it is dangerous and not to be messed with. Those are nature's danger colours. What we're talking about here is something called Aposematism. Aposematism, not something you want to get drunk and talk to Ken Livingstone about. You might not know the word, but you do know what aposematism is. In particular, we're really talking about aposematic colouring. That frog is sending you a signal, eat me, and we both die. That is aposematism in a nutshell. The classic warning colours are actually yellow and black. When we see it, it triggers something deep in our brain. I think that's why the manufacturers of these signs use those colours. And it doesn't matter what it's a warning for, whether it's radiation or electrocution, loose flooring, or even just a fidget spinner. We know that these creatures are dangerous. They should be avoided at all costs. Do not approach, stay well clear, back off. We know that.
Nearly 2 million people are victims of street crime every year.
Yeah, but Dom isn't one of them. Because the world instinctively knows he can only be approached with extreme caution. So we know that aposematism works, and that is why that frog is red. And they've used that colour on the tin of the ant killer. And it's why that wasp is black and yellow, and they've used those colours on the logo. So that can is screaming danger at the world, which would be fine if it hadn't been sitting on the same shelf in Paul's bathroom as this deodorant. This isn't a one-off. This is a genuine photo from Paul's bathroom. Why do his toiletries look like they want to kill you? There's even snake venom in his face scrub, for crying out loud. What kind of macho nonsense is this? How did men's toiletries get like that? Men won't clean themselves unless it makes them feel like they're survivalists. This is a dangerous route to go down, isn't it? This is messing with nature. We know that aposematism exists. That's why we are hardwired to have a natural fear of these colours. But it's in our DNA as a result of millions of years of evolution. If we spend the next few millennia using the same colours for products that are actually nice for us, don't we run the risk of eroding that natural fear? Eventually, we'll start seeing the red and yellow and black combinations as nice, cosy, something that means, oh, that'll make me smell nice, which is dangerous. Because in a few millennia, our descendants will be dying because they're picking these things up and rubbing them on their faces. Or worse still, shaking hands with that.